share my screen with you guys. And we'll take a look at the checklist. I think, a good number of you guys have already turned in your, I'll just wait till I pull it up so you know what I'm talking about. Your video and questions about fermented foods. I think some of you had some questions, so maybe at the end of the Zoom, I can help you get that taken care of. So don't forget about that. Yes, it was due, or it's due tonight. You're supposed to work on it tomorrow, but if you have some time today and you haven't finished, make sure to do that. I think it's a really entertaining video. What we're gonna do today is I'm gonna do a little quiz review. We're gonna look at some Kahoot questions, and then you guys are gonna take your 20-question quiz on respiration. And when I made this Kahoot, I had the quiz pulled up, right? So if you take your time and pay attention during the Kahoot and listen to my explanations, there's no reason why you shouldn't do really well on the quiz. And the quiz will open at 12 like noon, right? So I'm gonna try to do this Kahoot. I'm trying to get you all through it in less than 15 minutes. That way you'll have plenty of time to work on your quiz, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. So you'll need to go to kahoot.it or have the Kahoot app. Let me turn the music off. The music's kind of annoying. Okay. So there you guys go. You can go to www.kahoot.it and you just type in this PIN code. And please use either your first or your last name, because I am going to give extra credit to the top 3 individuals. So there are currently 15 of you guys in here. So I'm going to wait till I have 15. And while I wait for you guys to enter this, I need to go pull a bird feeder off a tree because it's really windy at my house right now. So I'll be right back. All right, here it comes. All right. Still missing some people. Let's get signed in. If you're having like serious Wi-Fi or tech issues, you can always play along in the chat. You just set the chat box to private, so only I can see your answers. Okay, I'm gonna wait another minute or two, then we're gonna have to get started. It actually turned out to be a pretty nice day. A little warmer than yesterday, that's for sure. All right, let's go ahead and do it. Okay, so I'm gonna read each question as well. What do you call an environment with no oxygen? Anaerobic, aerobic, stomata, or cytoplasmic? What term do we use to describe an environment with no oxygen? You're just gonna have to just ask yourself, okay, so what term do we use to describe oxygen, and so how can we change it to, yes, anaerobic. So aerobic means air. Think like aeroplane, airplane. So we're talking about oxygen. Anaerobic is no oxygen. What do you call an environment with oxygen? Yeah, fermentation, anaerobic, cytoplasmic, and aerobic. Yes, that would be aerobic. Fermentation is a type of anaerobic, or another name for anaerobic respiration, like alcoholic fermentation or lactic acid fermentation. The breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen. What do we call that? So if our cells are breaking down glucose for energy in the presence of oxygen. So our cells have plenty of oxygen to break down the sugar to release the energy. What do we call that? Yes, that's aerobic respiration. Lactic acid fermentation does happen in our muscles, but that is in the absence of oxygen, right? So, if you're sprinting really, really hard and you run out of air, you're breathing heavily. That's when your muscles will really start to burn. Fermentation is another name for anaerobic respiration, right? So this is all without. So aerobic respiration, aerobic means oxygen, respiration, we're talking about breaking down sugar for energy. The breakdown of glucose in the absence of oxygen. So if your cells don't have enough oxygen, they will break down sugar for energy using this. And the key there is absence of oxygen, no oxygen. Yes, that's anaerobic respiration. What organelle performs aerobic respiration? So in our cells, we have the mighty powerhouse of the cell. Your muscle cells, especially if you're a well-trained athlete, have many of these. The powerhouse of the cell, the mighty mitochondria. Okay, remember the chloroplast performs photosynthesis and it absorbs light using the chlorophyll, which is a green light or a green pigment, absorbs light. And the cytoplasm, we'll talk more about the cytoplasm later. That's just like the jelly that fills a cell. So the mighty mitochondria performs aerobic respiration. What are the reactants of aerobic respiration? So what does the mitochondria need to get started? So think about the chemical equation. I'll give you a hint. Breaking down sugar with air. So what is another word for sugar? Another word for air. Yes, oxygen and glucose are what we start with, right? So the mitochondria uses oxygen to break down the glucose, eventually trying to convert it, at least trying to convert the energy in the glucose into transferring it to ATP, which is like a little molecular battery that our cells use to transfer energy. What are the products of aerobic respiration? So when our mitochondria does break the glucose down with oxygen, what do we make? I'll give you a hint. We breathe this gas out. Every time you exhale, you release this gas. That's carbon dioxide. Yep, and then you release water as well. So those are products of aerobic respiration. Now, ATP, the little energy transferring molecule, is also formed during this process, but it's not a true product. We didn't make it. We're just like kind of transferring the energy to it. Just like when you charge your battery, you didn't make the battery. You just charged it up. What does lactic acid fermentation produce? This happens in our muscles. When we exercise with no oxygen or we exercise really, really hard. Makes our muscles burn. Yes, that's lactic acid fermentation, right? So when our muscle cells run out of oxygen, they panic, right? And they have to have energy somehow. And so they use lactic acid fermentation, which produces lactic acid and ATP, but it does not produce a lot of energy. That's why when you're exercising and your muscles start to burn, it's like, all right, yeah, I've got maybe 1 or 2 more reps and then I'm done, right? Too much lactic acid and not enough ATP. What does alcoholic fermentation produce? So we use yeast to make beer and bread. So what exactly does alcoholic fermentation produce? Good, right? Alcoholic fermentation produces alcohol, and the scientific name for alcohol is ethanol. Carbon dioxide, which is why the bread rises and why beer is carbonated, and it makes a little bit of ATP, but not much. The yeast does not want, most living things do not want to use alcoholic fermentation because ethanol is poisonous and it does not make a lot of energy. What type of respiration produces the most energy? I'll give you a hint. So I'm a big rock climber. Right? And so as this woman climbs this wall, she's going to have to make sure that she keeps breathing if she hopes to have enough energy to get to the top. That's why sometimes you see, aerobic respiration, right? So when you're rock climbing, you get afraid. A lot of times people are scared, so they hold their breath, right? And if you hold your breath, you don't get enough air for aerobic respiration. Your body uses lactic acid fermentation and her forearms would start to burn and hurt really bad. So while she's climbing, she needs to make sure to breathe, When I take people out climbing sometimes, the first time they're 100 feet off the ground, hanging on the side of a cliff, they're scared and they're holding their breath. They're not breathing, which makes it harder to climb. You need to relax and just breathe. The more air you get, the more likely your cells are going to use aerobic respiration. If you've never tried rock climbing, you should. What type of respiration occurs in our muscles when we do not have enough oxygen? So the football player, when they are sprinting as fast as they can, and they've got that mouthpiece in there, their body is going to unfortunately start using this, which will make their muscles hurt really bad. And that's lactic acid fermentation, right? So it makes our muscles burn when we're exercising really, really hard. What factors can affect the rate of respiration? So these scuba divers need to be thinking about a couple things if they want to have enough energy to complete their dive. So first and foremost, what's in their tank, right? They probably wanted to make sure to eat before they went scuba diving. And then why are they wearing wetsuits? Yes, right? So these scuba divers, if they want to stay down there and have plenty of energy, they're going to want to make sure to eat beforehand, right? So glucose is good short-term energy. So the amount of sugar in your blood can affect how fast or how much energy your body can make. And then these scuba divers have to take oxygen with them, right? Because they want to make sure to have lots of oxygen so they get lots of energy. And they're wearing a wetsuit to stay warm. Because when our bodies get cold, everything slows down. And if our bodies get too hot, right, we could potentially denature our enzymes and chemical reactions don't work well, right? Our body's going to like panic mode, right? Everything in nature kind of likes a nice like balance between hot and cold, right? Likes to be nice, happy in the middle. Yeast are used by brewers and bakers because they perform blank in anaerobic environments. So yeast, which is actually a fungus, is used by beer brewers and bread bakers because the yeast perform this. That's alcoholic fermentation, right? And so even in bread, the yeast are going to be producing a little bit of alcohol and carbon dioxide. That's why the bread rises, and that's why it smells so good when it's baking. Lactic acid fermentation can be used to produce cheese, yogurt, and sore muscles. True or false? When I first learned about this, I was like, whoa, that's weird. Yeah, the answer is true, right? I know it's weird to think that lactic acid fermentation happens in my muscles and then also happens in the cheese and yogurt making process, right? There's certain bacteria known as lactobacillus that we actually mix with, the curdling part of milk to make yogurt. That's why it's sour, is because of the lactic acid. Acids tend to taste sour, like citric acid in fruit and lactic acid in yogurt. What type of organisms perform some type of respiration to produce energy? What type of organisms use respiration? Kind of a trick question. Because remember, respiration is getting energy from food, sugar, with or without oxygen. Yeah, that's right. All organisms. Every living thing on planet Earth is going to use some form of respiration. Well, congratulations to the three of you guys. You guys earned some extra credit on today's quiz. And look at these, guys. 13 out of 15, 12 out of 15. Guys, these questions are straight from your quiz, okay? So your quiz just opened up 2 minutes ago. So go take your quiz. You'll go under your third period biology. And obviously, it's going to be under Unit 3. So you've got under Unit 3, cell metabolism. And you can see it right there. Just popped up. Your quiz on respiration. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure to sign it. Okay, there you guys are. Make sure to also finish your video questions. Looks like a lot of you guys already did. If you have any questions about the video questions, hang out in the Zoom, but everyone else is free to go and go take your quiz. Remember, Monday is asynchronous, so we won't Zoom again until Tuesday.